Welcome to the District Court Show. This is a production of the 10th Judicial District. I'm Judge Steve Halsey from Wright County. My co-host is Judge Elizabeth Strand, also from Wright County. And the topic of our discussion on this program is going to be distracted driving. And our two guests, first are Lieutenant Don Marose. Don's been with the Minnesota State Patrol for 27 years, so welcome.
Thank you.
And our other guest is Vijay Dixit. Vijay is a chemical engineer in operations management, and he is the founder of the Sherya Dixit Memorial Foundation, and he's going to talk about that foundation and some of its activities, and we'll give the folks that are watching a link to his website. We're going to start first with some definitions, and I was just mentioning to the guests that there is certainly no shortage of information of all kinds and from different agencies on the web about distracted driving, and I'm just going to first give a very general definition. Distracted driving is any activity that could divert a person's attention away from the primary task of driving. All distractions endanger driver, passenger, and bystander safety. And those include texting, eating, drinking, using a cell phone, grooming, and a variety of other things. And next, Judge Strand is going to talk about the Minnesota statutes that outlaw certain types of distracted driving.
I pulled out three, Judge Halsey. Minnesota's dealt with distracted driving in a few fashions. The first statute I pulled out is duty to drive with due care. It is a petty misdemeanor offense unless an individual is driving in such a way as to endanger people or property. Then it can become a misdemeanor offense. But this statute says that no person shall drive a vehicle on a highway at a speed greater than is reasonable and prudent under the conditions. Every driver is responsible for becoming and remaining aware of the actual and potential hazards then existing on the highway and must use due care in operating a vehicle. In every event, speed shall be so restricted as may be necessary to avoid colliding with any person, vehicle, or other conveyance on or entering the highway in compliance with legal requirements and the duty of all persons to use due care. There's a careless driving statute, which is a misdemeanor. It can be a payable misdemeanor unless, again, there's property damage or damage to an individual. Then it is a mandatory court appearance. But this statute says that any person who operates or halts any vehicle upon any street or highway carelessly or heedlessly in disregard of the rights of others, or in a manner that endangers or is likely to endanger any property or any person, including the driver or passengers of the vehicle, is guilty of a misdemeanor. Minnesota also implements a no texting while driving statute. Use of wireless communications device is the name of the statute. I will not read this one verbatim, but in essence, it says that people are not allowed to email, text message, send an instant message, or command or request access to the World Wide Web. If they do, and if they're caught doing that, it is a misdemeanor offense. And before the start of the show, I just mentioned, I think this is a difficult statute to enforce.
So let's talk about enforcement with Lieutenant Marose. So tell us about enforcement and some of the challenges.
Well, as you mentioned, Judge, there are three different things that we can apply to distracted driving. One of them very specifically about the use of electronic communication devices, either to send or receive electronic messages, but we all know today that our phones do a lot more than that. So when I see somebody using their telephone in their vehicle, it is not illegal to make phone calls. It's not illegal to listen to their music. It is not illegal to pull up or to use it as a GPS under that specific statute. The first two that you mentioned, the duty to drive with due care and the careless driving statute, those are a little bit more, I don't want to say ambiguous, but they don't specify the violation. They just say anything that can cause somebody's attention to be drawn from their driving. So a lot of times we do like to implement those statutes a little bit more often because they aren't as specific. If I do stop somebody that I believe has been texting or emailing or instant messaging on their phone, the level of proof that I need to get would be to get my hands on their phone to see if they in fact have that, or to ask them. And if they opt not to tell me that they were texting or don't want to give me their phone, and quite honestly they don't have to, my level of proof is is just what I saw as I was driving next to them or what I saw them doing in their vehicle, which, again, could be pulling up music, could be, you know, punching into their GPS, whatever, under that specific statute. So, again, a lot of times if we kind of go to the ambiguous or less specific statute that just says anything that can lead to somebody's distraction, those sometimes are a little bit more applicable in some of those situations.
Any exceptions for sitting at a stoplight, stop sign, that type of thing?
Well, the electronic media devices, that is anywhere in traffic. So that's virtually anywhere on the roadway, even if, quite honestly, even if somebody pulls over to the shoulder, which is a better thing to do than to try to do those things while you're driving, but that's still technically anywhere on the roadway, which is essentially, you know, shoulder to shoulder, ditch to ditch, however, whatever the design of the roadway is. So, so no exception as far as that statute goes.
So generally, it's not a good idea to pull off on I-94 during rush hour and sit and text on the shoulder.
Well, it's never a good idea to stop the freeway for those types of things. In fact, we do have the non-emergency stop statute as well. So that would be considered a non-emergency stop. So on a freeway, certainly get off the freeway onto a city street maybe to do those types of things.
Okay.
And may I ask, what times of day do you find are the most dangerous in terms of distracted drivers? Is it mornings, during rush hour, on the way
I would
home?
say, well, we certainly see it 24/7. And there isn't a time that we see more of it, unless there's just more vehicles out there, then we tend to see more just by the volume of people that are on the road. But I would say more likely higher volume of traffic, just because there's more stop and go, there's a lot more input, there's a lot more information you have to be able to process. And I've certainly seen people using 2 or 3 lanes of the freeway, you know, in the middle of the night, and you find them and I'm eating a hamburger, I was talking on my phone, whatever. Well, there's fewer things to hit. So not that it's better to do it at night, but certainly there's fewer distractions out there and fewer things that can get in your way.
Okay. So Vijay, why don't you give us a little bit of introduction to how you got involved in the issues of distracted driving, and then we're going to be showing a 4-minute video that's from your foundation's website.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your show. Well, I was placed into this position, not by choice, but by an event that occurred close to 8 years ago, the 1st of November 2007, when my daughter Sherya was coming home for the weekend. And she got a ride in the morning, and 6 o'clock or so she called us that, oh yeah, we are leaving now. She never came. What happened was the girl who was driving got distracted, and in that process oversteered the car, tried to correct it, and then crashed under a overpass, those pillars, big pillars, and then crashed the car on the side Sherya was sitting. And we lost her in a second. That was the start of a foundation, really. The passing of Sherya was the birth of a foundation, and within a few months we started this foundation to mobilize the community against this epidemic, which is now actually is an epidemic. As officer to tell me that, even confirm that. And so we saw that, you know, it's good to start a foundation, do some mobilization, but got to do some special programs. And that's what we have been doing for the last 8 years. Different initiatives at different kind of levels of engagement. Because I feel that distracted driving is a multi-headed animal. It's not like drunk driving. Drunk driving is very bad. But you can catch the person very easily. As the officer said, that it's very difficult. And Judge Strand, you mentioned that it's very difficult to catch those people. And whereas distraction can occur from just reaching out for a napkin, that's what this girl was doing, supposedly, when she crashed the car in which my daughter was sitting. She was not texting, she was not doing anything. She said that she was reaching out for a napkin at the back. So it doesn't have to be a big thing. You just have to have your eyes and hands on the steering, as well as eyes on the road and mind on the road itself.
And before we turn to the to the video, looking at some of the information that's on the Minnesota Traffic Safety website, could you talk a little bit, Don, about what studies have shown about whether is this as bad as drunk driving? The attention, the judgment, all of that.
There are some studies that have been done, and we hear that a lot, that it's as bad as drunk driving. And there was a study done by the University of Utah that found drivers on cell phones had slower reaction times than most drivers, as we could imagine. And they said that their reaction time is probably equal to somebody that's at about a 0.08 alcohol concentration. And it's very hard to get that data and try to figure out if that in fact is applicable or not. But certainly just from, anecdotally, we can look and say somebody whose attention is distracted when you're going at 60 miles an hour, you're traveling 88 feet per second. So even if your attention's distracted by a quarter of a second, you're going to go an extra 22 feet, which that can be the difference between hitting something at, or not hitting it, or hitting it at 15, 20 miles an hour. And that's a pretty significant hit. That seems like a pretty small number speed-wise, but I always challenge people, you don't think that's a big number, let's go stand in the parking lot and, we'll hit you at 20 miles an hour and see if you think that that's a big hit or not. So when we look at what distracts people and what causes some of those crashes, it's pretty significant. And the data's there. We see it every year. We crunch the numbers from our crash facts every year in Minnesota and around the country. The difficult part is, again, I get to a crash scene, how do I know that that person was distracted unless they tell me? Or somebody sees them, we have a witness that says, hey, they were looking down at the time of the crash. And those are the things that we have a very difficult time getting hard data. We've got numbers, but I mean, quite honestly, it's probably double or triple the numbers that we have when we look at percentages.
And if there's a serious case involving death or really serious injury, and I'm aware that there's forensics that they can do, and they can get the cell phone and they can find out were their messages received, were their messages sent, did the phone ring, was the phone used for texting, during the minutes prior to whatever serious accident there was. We're going to now go to the video that's off of the website that is for the Sherya Dixit Memorial Foundation. It's called Defeat Distracted Driving. It's about 4 minutes and it's on YouTube, so we'll go to that video right now.
What started us to do this, what made us do this, was an event that occurred close to 7 years ago on 1st of November 2007, when Sherya was coming home for the weekend, got a ride, and the girl who was driving got distracted, and in that process crashed the car on the side Sherya was sitting on, and we lost her in a split second.
We don't take driving seriously enough. Most of us drive more every day than we walk. And walking is very simple. We take that, it's just second nature. And so when we're walking, we feel like we can talk on the cell phone, and we can be fiddling with the internet, and we can be eating a hamburger because we're just walking. And we begin to have the same mental attitude about driving.
My name is Jennifer Zamora Jameson, and I lost my husband in 2007, and this is my first year participating in this. I drove all the way up from Texas. I think that the penalty for taking someone's life by intentionally doing something that is dangerous should have a larger penalty than jaywalking.
My name is Neha Dixit. I'm here because this foundation is in memory of my sister Sherya, who we lost about 7 years ago. We started this foundation because we wanted to make a difference. We didn't want to, like Mark Ritchie said today at the walk, we don't want to just remember her. We want to do something to keep her memory alive and make a difference in people's lives.
Our son was killed by a drunk driver 20 years ago. It's so tragic and so senseless.
I walk for my boyfriend David. That's his picture there. He was killed by a distracted driver last August. August 17th was the day that he passed away of 2013. So we're here to support Sherya's family and walk for David as well.
2 years ago, on April 25th, 2012, my son was on his bicycle, turned left to go through traffic, and a lady was going east, and she was on her cell phone. She didn't see him. She hit my son, and he bounced off the car, and then she ran over him. He was dead before we got there.
One thing that I definitely would like to say to those who are not at this walk, for that matter, those who are not committed to this issue at all. It is for someone's son, daughter, husband, wife, friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, brother, sister. All are impacted. Don't wait till it hits you.
Now therefore, I, Mark Dayton, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Saturday, August 2nd, 2014, Distraction-Free Driving Day.
You still texting?
Is this a real morgue?
Yep.
Shut up. Like with real dead people. Ooh, I gotta text Ashley.
Ashley identified you when you wrapped your car around that light pole because you was caring more about that thing than the road.
I knew she liked me.
Not anymore.
There's a reason it's illegal to text and access the web while driving.
Welcome back to the District Court Show. I'm Judge Steve Halsey from Wright County. We're talking about distracted driving, and we've talked a little bit about the definitions, and the penalties are relatively, I guess we could probably all agree, for such a dangerous activity are relatively small. Even a misdemeanor is probably only going to result in a fine unless there was a serious injury or accident with serious property damage. I'll just talk really briefly about my first experience as a judge, and this was more than 10 years ago. A young woman went to an American Legion, had a few drinks, got in her car. She drove about 200 yards, and she decided to fiddle with her radio, and she hit a motorcyclist head-on and killed him. And that case ended up going to a jury trial. The jury found her guilty of criminal vehicular homicide, and I sent her to prison for 4 years. So that's probably the maximum that could happen from any kind of a case like this. And I think we were discussing off camera that other than that, you know, the penalties are pretty small. And I know, Vijay, you talked at the presentation I saw you at, that you participated in trying to get the legislature to increase some of the penalties.
Yes.
So just talk briefly about that, about the second time you get a no texting ticket.
The first time I think it's $150, and second time it is $300 something, and the third offense is $450. So it keeps graduating up, but still I would say it's not enough to really inhibit that behavior. You got to do more.
Judge Halsey, in your example, that was a woman who was intoxicated.
She was intoxicated. I might have forgotten to say that. And that was kind of the triggering factor to make it into criminal vehicular operation, not that she was, you know, distracted.
And if you're not intoxicated and just distracted, it's a 90-day jail maximum penalty. There are misdemeanors. There's no middle ground. It's either a felony if you're intoxicated, and if not, it's a misdemeanor. So is there talk about crafting new law?
Yeah, and under the criminal vehicular homicide and injury statutes, there is provisions for non-intoxicated, but we have to prove gross negligence, which that's a pretty high standard a lot of times to prove that gross negligence if we're going to get a criminal vehicular charge. But you're right, there's gross misdemeanors, felony level criminal vehicular operation, and then it drops down to a misdemeanor. In fact, a number of years ago, the impetus for the Ted Foss move over law, the semi-driver who ran over Trooper Ted Foss and killed him, misdemeanor penalty because they couldn't get any proof that he had fallen asleep or that he was distracted or what it was. They just said, well, there's nothing that we have that we can't put our finger on to show that there was something more to this. So he had a $100 fine or whatever it was, and essentially that was all the extent of the penalty.
Well, Vijay, we're going to show in the credits at the end of the program, the link to your foundation's website. What are some of the things that you're doing to promote folks to be educated not to get involved in distracted driving?
Actually, a lot of them, in addition to a yearly walk, that's what our really grassroots mobilization effort, that's where it starts. We have a 5K and a 10K walk and run in Eden Prairie. That's where we get a lot of volunteers, different ages. In addition to that, because Shreya was a teenager, the girl who was distracted was a teenager, so my focus is a little bit more on the teenager side. And so we work with driver ed programs. I work with AAA of Minneapolis in their teen panels that they have, impact panels they call them, where I tell my story and then kind of persuade new kids along with their parents not to do that behavior. In addition to that, we are very proud to be able to offer stipends, $300 stipends to students in driver ed schools. And they have to just do a small project. And most of the initiatives that we have taken are very kind of incentivized rather than punitive. Or if you do this, we'll do this. No, do this for us, and then we'll give you a reward or an award. So last year we even have a public service announcement competition. Two things that we really did, and we are quite proud of that, was that in 2013 we created world's first massive open online course, which is a new technology for teaching at Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, other places. I worked with an MIT professor to create that. And we funded that project, and it's available on our website free of charge. And what it does is it's a special technology, it's an adaptive technology which first assesses the learning and the maturity level of the learner, and then delivers tailor-made material that blends in with that. And the other thing, two things that we are doing is, one is I'm working with the court system for distracted drivers, and then kind of mentoring them to become better drivers. And the latest initiative that we have taken is we are developing and building distraction-free driving clubs in high schools. Edina High School, Eden Prairie High School, and Hopkins High Schools are already signed in. And so we are bringing in more individuals and working with the University of Minnesota and Office of Traffic Safety to develop some rugged metrics on the success of those driving. So we could replicate it across the state and the country.
Don, what are some things that the State Patrol is doing to educate folks that this is just, too dangerous and can't be tolerated?
Well, any chance we can get the message out like this, so having me here, it's a great opportunity to get the message out, to tell people that really the couple of seconds that you take to get your eyes off the road and get your attention off the road can be tragic. And not jokingly, because it certainly isn't a funny topic, but I tell people, if you think that it's okay to take your eyes off the road for the 4 or 5 seconds to send a text, I challenge you to do this tonight on your way home. Get out on the freeway, close your eyes, and count 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000 as you're traveling down the road. And I'm not advocating that we do that, but most people are like, holy cow, I don't know that I could close my eyes for more than a second or two, and you just feel the anxiety, but they'll take their eyes off the road for 4 or 5, 6, 7 seconds to send a text. And the education piece is just to get people to realize what that is. So we've got enforcement every year. We do a distracted driving day. We focus on it all year, but we've got a big media push every year for distracted driving. And just last week we rolled out a half a dozen new unmarked cars that are going to get out there, which really help in the fight against distracted driving, because if they don't see us, it doesn't tend to change behavior as much when they don't see us coming. So.
What's the common response that the troopers are hearing from people that when they're stopped for that? Are they mad? Are they apologizing? Or
more often than not,
explaining?
they're not terribly forthcoming. They're not admitting what they were doing, and they're just, I was just looking up, directions, or I was just trying to get some music or whatever, or I was just trying to look up a number. And again, for us to get proof, it's very difficult sometimes under the specific electronic messaging statute, and we do have those other ones that if we believe that they have been distracted and it's leading to some poor driving decisions, we can certainly take action.
What has kept our legislature from adopting what some other states? I was out east in New Hampshire and Vermont last summer, and they had just, the law, I think it was August, I think the law had just gone into effect, no use of phones in cars, period. Is that something that's just not going to happen in Minnesota? People won't tolerate it?
The short answer is I don't know. The long answer is I think we're probably leaning that way, because I think there's enough, grassroots efforts and from the enforcement perspective that we know that it's a big enough problem. And the statute about the electronic messaging, I think that's a baby step or a half a step to get us there. And we see that. We see that that's changing some behavior, but not all of it. And I think it'll get down to the point it's like, well, the only way we can really get our arms around it is to just say, sorry, it's done completely.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of these in court, maybe a couple, and I think people are just paying the ticket and not fighting it because the penalty is relatively low.
I saw one, and frankly, it was a court trial, and I dismissed it because there was no proof that the individual was violating the law.
Right.
He said he was calling. So it is a difficult
It is very difficult.
law to enforce. In driver's education classes, I don't know the answer to this. Are they teaching more about distracted driving?
Well, driver, may I take this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Driver education is very much kind of how to steer the car and how to brake, how to, drive in inclement weather. But I don't think up until very recently, the driver ed programs have become a little bit more distraction-free driving focused. They have, but one new law that was passed last year, which you were talking about, is that parents and students have to attend together for a 3-hour training in the driver ed program. So parents are required to do that. So that is one part of education. And what we are doing, which is more like a complementary to the driver ed program, is that these kids that we are putting together in the driver, distraction-free driver clubs, they are leaders. So we are teaching them techniques and tools to influence other teenagers. So the focus is peer influence. And I've done a lot of research on brain of a teenager. So I think I'm going to leverage that quite a lot.
There's an entire chapter devoted to drinking and driving in the driver's manual in the state of Minnesota, but nothing on distracted driving.
No. Actually, we're working even on Russian communities, because there's a lot of Russian speaking. So actually, our foundation is working to translate AAA's driver ed program into Russian.
Wow.
Well, I've been giving the high side, and to wrap things up here, I want to thank our guests, Lieutenant Don Marose from the Minnesota State Patrol, Vijay Dixit. Thank you very much for being on. And thank you both for all the work you're doing to make the road safer in Minnesota.
Thank you for the invitation.
So thank you to our viewers for watching the program. If you watch the credits here, we're going to have a link to the Sherya Dixit Memorial Foundation. You'll see lots of information on there. Also, if you Google distracted driving, there's lots of information from Minnesota Safety Council, Minnesota Traffic Safety Department. So with that, thank you for watching the District Court Show, and we'll see you again next time.